A few years ago, I did an interview with David Regal, and something he said really stood out to me, and I want to explore it more in this episode of Erudite Magic. In that interview, he talked about winning the magic lottery. Here's exactly what he said.
In magic, I'm sort of in a lottery because there's a chance, 50 years from now, I'm gone. Someone pulls out a trick or a book and they like it and they do it. And, I sort of live on.
In previous episodes of the show, I've shared with you some hidden gems, tricks from books that I thought have been overlooked or that have meant something to me and I wanted you to know about. This episode is going to be the same thing, but I decided that it would be interesting if we did it on one creator, someone so prolific and someone so creative that he deserves his own episode of Hidden Gems. And since David Regal was the one who brought up this concept to me of winning this magic lottery, why not start with him? So in this video, we're going to go through the anthology of David Regal magic literature. I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite tricks, and while I initially thought that I might do it by category instead, I'm going to go by book, because the entire focus of this channel is about magic books. And if you have the book, well, obviously, you can get back into your library, which is part of the big picture goals that I have for the channel. Don't worry, if you don't have these books, most of them are still readily available, so you can get in on the fun as well. I don't think I need to tell you how much I like David Regal, but in case you aren't amped up enough about this episode, David is one of the most creative and prolific authors that I've had the pleasure of reading. I love reading his material, in part because he is a script writer. He worked for the Carbonaro Effect, but before that, he actually wrote episodes for TV, most notably his work on Everybody Loves Raymond and Rugrats. So he knows what a good script looks like, and that shines through in most of the descriptions he's writing up because these are engaging premises. But more than that, like we discussed in my last Erudite Magic Digest newsletter, David is not only a creator, he's also a performer. No, he's not a corporate or college circuit magician, but he does perform regularly at the Magic Castle, and audience tests most of this material. That's one of the reasons I believe he is so well liked as a creator. You know that this is going to work for situations that you find yourself performing in. All right, that's enough about all this. Let's dive in to some of my favorite David Regal tricks and see if we can't find one that'll work for you. Curveball, the first book is not one that was actually authored by David Regal. However, it does contain exclusively David Regal material. We're talking about Star Quality, The Magic of David Regal, written by Harry Lorraine. That's right, David was kind of discovered by Harry Lorraine, who published a lot of his tricks in Apocalypse magazine, and eventually he submitted enough creative ideas that Harry Lorraine thought it would be a good idea to put them all in one book. Now, the book isn't necessarily available anymore. However, you can pick up Harry Lorraine, The Classic Collection Volume 4, which includes all of Star Quality. That's my reference to this material, and if you have that book or Apocalypse, check out Clearly Impossible. Originally contributed to the December 1985 edition of Apocalypse magazine, it demonstrates just how clever a thinker David Regal is when it comes to creating gimmicks that do a lot of the work for you in this coins through table routine. It uses a drinking glass and some coins, and David takes advantage of a really deceptive principle at work here. With nothing more than a clear glass, some coins, and a table, it doesn't feel like there could be any gimmicks at work, but there is, and I'm going to leave it to you to do the research to figure out exactly why this trick is the first of many on this list. Later in the same book, you'll find a trick called Self-Evident. This is a card trick, and it's a prediction effect, but it's unlike most of the other ones you've ever seen. The basics of the effect is that your participant deals down cards face up one at a time until they make a decision to set one aside. They can even change their mind if they want to. Once they lock in their decision, you show them that you've been using a red back deck, but the one card that they set aside is the only card with a blue back. Really easy to do and incredibly deceptive. David Regal is one of the first creators to come up with a piece-by-piece torn and restored card restoration. The original, appropriately named Piece by Piece, is also found in this book. While there are plenty of other great tricks in this book, I'm going to jump on to the next one. These aren't all of my favorite tricks from each book because we've got to keep moving here, but if you have favorite tricks that I missed, then why don't you drop them down in the comments below for everyone else, because the more people share what they like from David Regal, the more likely he is to win the magic lottery. And along the way, basically you win too. The next book we're going to look into is one that I coveted for a long time until I finally snagged a used copy on the secondary market. The book is Close Up and Personal, basically the first book that he wrote himself. He published it in 1999, so this is a golden oldie at this point. It's here in his own book that you first start to see the typical David Regal breakdown of the tricks. He's so creative and so prolific in a number of ways that he has to categorize in the table of contents the types of magic. So you're going to find things with cards, and implying that there are other things at work here. Dollars, which are his cash or coin tricks, assemblies, mental, and gaffed decks. The first trick in the book right out of the gate is a winner, all's fair, which is another prediction effect similar to the one I referenced in the Harry Lorraine Star Quality book. This time you can do it with a borrowed deck. Your participant is allowed to deal down freely from both a face down deck and turning it over from the face up deck to arrive at 2 cards that make up a value of a card, and that made up card matches an isolated prediction that you made. Again, super easy to do and very fooling. There are plenty of examples of tricks in his books where he takes something that's really not that hard to do, maybe something you even already know, and dresses it up with a better premise, a better plot, and even sometimes a simpler method. 10-second poker is just such a trick. This is effectively nothing more than the Marlowe Gardner poker deal, but on steroids, where your participant becomes the hero, and you dress this up with a very interesting premise that literally keeps the trick moving along quickly, so it erases the inherent problem of having to deal multiple times with not that much interesting happening. It maintains all of the ease of the original, but frankly, more conviction because of the freely shuffled packets at the beginning. You'll have to do more reading if you want to see exactly why and how this works. Lest you think that everything David Regal has created up to this point is just cards or coins, the next trick deviates from this, but maintains the simplicity and impact of all of these David Regal tricks. It's there and back. And this trick is so good that not only did David Regal at one point close his Magic Castle act with it, Paul Daniels also chose to include it on one of his TV specials. The effect is quite simple. An object is borrowed, something like a ring. It's put down on your close-up pad, you cover it with some cocktail napkins, you invert 2 wine glasses over the cocktail napkins, and when you wave your hands over it, the object moves from under one wine glass to the other. You can have the object move back and forth multiple times if you want, but the point is, this is drop dead simple. It can be done with any small borrowed object. If that doesn't pique your interest, I don't know what will. One of the themes that I've seen throughout the David Regal books is his interest in the cups and balls and or the chop cup. And in Close Up and Personal, he shares what will become a trend of using some rather zany props, off-the-wall thinking to come up with something incredibly creative and will definitely be remembered by your audience. My Best Friend is a trick using a chop cup, but instead of the typical cup and ball, you're using a stuffed mouse and a cup. The plot that he gives you in the patter is around his best friend, his pet mouse Herman. And in the end, the final load is thematically appropriate. You produce a block of cheese and a second final load, which is a bunch of stuffed mice out of the cup. Not everyone's cup of tea, but you should at least read through this to start to get the idea of how you might tailor your own presentations to make them more memorable, more original, or just add some small piece of yourself to the presentation. The half deal is a quickie card trick, kind of demonstrating a gambling move that doesn't really exist. It's the half deal. In effect, you are dealing the face off of a signed card. Yes, it's just as strange as it sounds, but it's pretty easy to do, and it's way off the beaten path, so when people say, "Oh, I've seen that card trick," you can guarantee them that they haven't seen this, and then impress them with something they'll probably never see again. I mentioned before the torn and restored piece-by-piece restoration in his first book, and this kicked off a pretty big storm of these piece-by-piece restorations. Of course, probably the most famous is Guy Hollingworth's The Reformation. It's a pretty difficult trick, and John Lovick decided to try to simplify it with his version, The Reparation. It was originally published right here in Close Up and Personal, and if you've always wanted to learn a piece-by-piece restoration of a torn and restored card, this is yet another version that you can study from the magic literature. I've always said that if you're going to perform a card trick, it's really great when you can do something that isn't normally happening with cards. When you destroy a card by tearing it, you write on it, you deal the face off of it. These are things that people have never seen before, and it doesn't cross their minds could even happen. This next trick is along the same vein. It's called pipped off, and it's a lot like the half deal. But in this case, you're knocking all of the pips off of a card, and they literally fly to the table so that your participants can see that the face is just gone from this card. It's a quickie and might be a great way to finish off a routine with another surprise climax. The Poor Man's Wallet is another piece that I've played with. It's a fake pitch item. That's the plot. You're showing someone how you've come up with a wallet that will keep your money safe and protected. You borrow a dollar bill, put it into this paper wallet that you've created, cut it in half, show that it's clearly cut in half, and then restore that dollar bill and hand it back out. If you're looking to do something for social media, this is a great trick, but it plays equally as well for people in a live environment. Penny for your thoughts is a prediction of the date on a jar full of pennies that your participant chooses at random after mixing up all of the pennies. Believe it or not, this is actually a force, and it's a pretty clever one. So if you're interested in something off the beaten path, or your close-up or a parlor show, and it fits with your theme to include pennies or money, he even gives you a funny punchline to close out the entire prediction. In the back of this book, under the gaff deck section, I'm not actually going to give you a favorite here. They're all pretty great. But what I want to point out is that a lot of these were marketed effects, and many of you probably bought them at the time. So if you want to learn how to make them, and most of them are relatively simple to make yourself, you're already getting a lot of value from a book like this, and that's part of the point of a video like this. If you were ever interested in the ad copy for one of these tricks, you can make it up, learn how to do it, put it in front of an audience yourself just by going through what you already have on your shelf. I mentioned David Regal being so prolific, so while Close Up and Personal was published in 1999, he was already publishing a new 2-volume set, Constant Fooling 1 and 2. While you can buy them separately, I really think of them as being one giant book together, because the categories are totally different. So if you look at the table of contents on something like Dennis Baer's Conjuring Archive, you can decide what type of material fits you, and these books are still currently available. Early on in book 1, the world's first card trick is an interesting prediction effect, and yes, David Regal has a lot of these. You've heard me mention several others. What makes this one different, and the reason I'm pointing it out to you, is that there's a really interesting forcing technique here to allow your participants to riffle shuffle the deck on the table and yet maintain the force card that you need. I think it has a lot of applications even outside of this particular trick. This trick by itself is still pretty good and can be done from a shuffled deck in use. On Call is another fun way to do a card trick, because unlike most card tricks of choosing a card, I'll find it, or something similar to that, in this case, your participant is making a lot of choices and handling the deck, freely selecting cards, and in the end, these cards form the phone number of your participant. Now, while David takes no credit for the originality of the effect of producing your participant's phone number, what he does take credit for and is noteworthy is that the procedure is streamlined, simplified, and of course, he includes some trademark jokes that you can use as gags while your participant is looking at these numbers and not recognizing them as their phone number immediately. I mentioned previously David Regal's seeming obsession with cups and balls that are off the beaten path, and Cups and Balls and Cups and Balls is probably one of his best known. I remember before I purchased these books, I was obsessed with this trick because I really loved the premise that we all had those little plastic cups and balls sets when we got our first magic kit. It helped us to fall in love with magic and then to do a trick with some better cups and balls, but with the final loads being that old plastic set of cups and balls, just really appealing. You're gonna have to have some arts and crafts skills to make this work out, and it's not gonna work out for everyone. You may prefer a more pure version of the cups and balls, but if you like interesting premises and surprising final loads, this one is really great. Battery Power is a fun interlude for when you've done a number of card tricks and you want to mix it up and do something else, potentially in a walk-around set. It's a 2 in the hand, 1 in the pocket style routine, done with batteries removed from your card case. In the end, you produce a giant lantern battery as the surprising climax. If you've ever wanted to do a ring to impossible location, but didn't want to purchase any kind of expensive props or routines, then Barrel of Monkeys is probably for you. Probably most of us, if you're my age or above, played with the Barrel of Monkeys toy set, and David Regal has taken that prop and found a way to incorporate it into a magic routine. You borrow someone's ring, it vanishes, and appears at the end of a long chain of monkeys that you pull from their barrel. Easy, inexpensive, and different. Oh, and did I mention he performed this in his Magic Castle act? Who doesn't remember when David Williamson performed on the World's Greatest Magic Special and had Rocky the Raccoon jump through the air to find someone's card, and it was all complete mayhem and fun? David Regal has taken this concept and worked it down to a smaller size that is performable for more of us. He calls it Rodent in a Box, and it basically is another stuffed mouse jumping out of a box toward a spring of cards going into the air and clamping on one with their mouth. You can make this yourself and it won't cost you an arm and a leg. You'll need a cardboard box, some toys you can get at the dollar store, and of course, some stuffed mice with a deck of cards. If you're looking for something zany, off the beaten path, and different, I think you just found your North Star. I don't want you to think that David Regal is rodent obsessed. He's actually not. But yet he continues to explore these themes of magic with offbeat rodent props, and Caught in the Act is no exception. It's a way to find a selected card using a mousetrap. You drop the deck of cards onto a loaded mousetrap, and it catches the one card that your participant thought of. Shred of Proof isn't actually a trick, but it is a way to conclude your routine with a revelation or a prediction, if you will. But instead of just having a regular sheet of paper, it's one of those old ciphers, like a piece of paper wrapped around a pencil. The premise and presentation for him centers around a message from his grandfather, which may or may not work for you, but it's an interesting revelation nevertheless. Heading North is a rising card effect that won't require you to buy any expensive props. In fact, you can make this yourself using any type of deck that you have around. Even better, you can make one of these gimmicks using your favorite bicycle, either red or blue, maybe both. Take them with you, slip it into your friend's deck on an offbeat moment when you're performing at a convention or at someone's house and you borrow a deck, and then you too can do a rising card from a borrowed shuffled deck. This next trick is for my friends who maybe want to perform some mentalism but don't feel like they can get away with it. David Regal got permission to print Journey to Love from Larry Becker. The key difference and the reason that it might appeal to some of my mental magic or magician friends who don't want to perform straight mentalism is that David has given this a comedic presentation to what is really just a prediction mentalism trick, but using physical props. The trick is self-working and a lot of fun to do. The very last card is another mentalism type routine, but you don't need to be a mentalist to perform it. The effect is pretty simple. Your audience is given a pack of cards and you're eliminating all but one of the cards. You're walking around with a trash can, it's complete mayhem, people are throwing cards away, but in the end, the last card that is not selected matches a jumbo prediction handed to an audience member at the very beginning of the trick. It plays really big and it allows you to mix it up without just staying on the stage. You can go out into your audience, do some crowd work. Of course, there's lots of opportunity for byplay, and in the end, you're left with an amazing card prediction. There's an entire section in Constant Fooling 2 that I think is worth the price of the book, and it's called Getting Sticky. It's David Regal using some simple office supplies that you might not have sitting around your house, but you can easily obtain. There are a lot of killer tricks in this section that just make it so impossible to backtrack and figure out how it's done, but I'll point you to a couple that were favorites of mine. The first is Sticky Mama, where someone chooses a card and it is the only odd-backed card in the deck. It is cleaner than the other versions that I've mentioned before, but it can't be done from a borrowed shuffled deck without doing something special. And the next one is a Tacky Introduction. It reminds me sort of a weird version of Phil or Oscar deck, where your participant gets to choose a card and it's the only one in the deck with a label on the back that says, "Hello, my name is your card." It really is the only card in the deck with that. They can look through the rest of the deck and you can even use it for other tricks in your set if you so desire. After Hours won't be for everyone, but it's a Sam the Bellhop style routine, but with David's own take on the presentation. So if you're interested in another story deck, don't have one, haven't purchased Sam the Bellhop, or haven't explored it, this is one that you can check out because people seem to love a good story deck routine. We've already gone through a lot of tricks, but if you don't have some of these books, then consider shopping with the sponsor of this week's video, Don's Magic and Books, to purchase them from him. Don is one of the best online magic book sources out there. And the reason for that is, with him, you can find the newest books that you really want, but you can also find some of these older and out-of-print books that are harder to come by. No matter which type of book you're searching for, you're going to find them at fair and reasonable prices on his website, and he has free shipping options available. I've purchased more than my fair share of books from him, and I hear from so many of you that you've become lifelong customers once you've visited his website and done your first shopping with him. His customer service is next to none, and Don is a guy who loves magic books himself, so it's always great to support someone who loves books as much as you and me. So do that this week by shopping with Don's Magic and Books. Okay, we only have 2 books to go, and I'm going to try to keep this moving pretty quickly because this video has gone on long enough. The next book is Approaching Magic. I've done a review on this book early on in the channel's history, and that's because it's one of my favorites. I think pound for pound, it's one of the best bargains in Magic with the variety of different magic props and things used in it. But let me share some of my highlights from this book. Stand-Up Showdown early on in the book is one of those great tricks that gives you the gambler versus participant stories that you can share, but it can be done from a stand-up position. You don't have to be seated at a table to pull it off. Coco is another make-your-own offbeat chop cup style routine using a mug, a giant marshmallow as the ball, And your final load here is liquid or cocoa coming out of this cup that you've been using. So if mice weren't your thing before, well, then this is actually a pretty great holiday party trick and can be thematically consistent as opposed to using a random magician's prop like the cups that most of us have. A lot of David Regal tricks are fairly quick and punchy. However, he has a full-scale routine that requires a full deck setup called luck. And it can be used in a lot of different performing environments. Sometimes he'll pit a man versus a woman, maybe a husband and wife, or in a work contest, a boss and a subordinate, or just at a house party, you can pit two people against each other. But it's a 3-phase routine with a lot of magic happening, and most of it is self-working. The first effect is a cut to a high card type effect where one participant always wins. There's a color sensitivity effect where one participant can actually feel the difference in the colors. And then there's a 10-card poker routine, but instead of the routine focusing on pitting you against your audience, it's two audience members, which again shares some of the genius of David Regal's way of thinking about how to approach a classic magic effect. A hookup is David Regal's way to use invisible thread if you're at a seated performance environment, and it offers a lot of opportunities to prove that there's no hookups. The one trick uses a dollar bill that animates itself and then ultimately ends up floating inside a glass that's covered. If you're familiar with invisible thread, you might already know some techniques, but the beauty of this is that if you're not, this is a self-contained unit that can do something like the bill animation I just talked about or a haunted pack style routine, but without a lot of the fear that you get from working with invisible thread. Restored credit is another commercial routine that David Regal released before, but you can learn how to make it up for yourself right here in this book using either some older credit cards that you have, or better yet, I always thought that a hotel room key would be a great presentation for this trick because you're going to break a card in half, show that there are two different sides, and then restore it back together. It seems like a great premise for when you get locked out of your room because you accidentally broke this card in half and you needed to use a little magic to get back in. But as taught, it does use a credit card, so this is something you can make up, carry around in your wallet, and always have ready to go. Another chop cup routine, this one a little more traditional. It uses a regular chop cup, whatever kind you have laying around, a dollar bill that's rolled up and keeps disappearing into the cup, and the final load is a whole bunch of change that you shake out of the cup. Perfect for an accountant like me. The curiously strong nest of boxes uses some organic props for a card to box routine. You use Altoid tins, the big one and the little one, and as you can imagine, your participant's selected card ends up appearing inside these nested boxes. A card at a number is more than just a trick. It does allow you to have a participant's card selected, returned to the deck, and they can name a number and you count down and it's found there. He gives you a couple of different methods, so choose your own favorite here, but it is really cool and really easy to do. Will the socks match? What can I say about this one? This is another one of those Larry Becker will the cards match, but done with a different prop, one that will play for a bigger audience. In this case, it's will the socks match, and as you can imagine, he uses socks, which have a natural pairing aspect to the presentation. I've done this trick a number of times for a lot of different things, for my initiation show into the IBM, for a Zoom show back during COVID, and I've even performed it for some paid shows. It's a real worker, a real fooler, and gives you a lot of opportunity for humor and customization. Simpatico is another one of these card at a number type routines, but it uses two participants, and the deck is out of your hands for pretty much the entire trick. One participant fans the deck to another, allows them to select a card, it's returned, and when the second participant deals down through cards and stops, whatever card they stop on is the first participant's card. So it's another one of those great, we can create magic with our participants instead of it always being about us. This is another great trick if you're a wedding performer. You could do this for the happy couple, anniversary parties, corporate gigs. If you want to work in a presentation about trusting your coworkers, it's limited by your imagination, but really easy to do and really fun. The impossible envelope is a mentalism style routine, but the cool part is it can be incorporated into almost any mentalism aspect you already have. You can ask some questions of your participant about where they're from in the country, do they prefer spicy food or mild food, and a couple of series of questions, and in the end, you have an envelope which shows you knew the answer to all of their questions. There are other ways to deploy this. It doesn't have to be his presentation, but I have a lot of notes here about how I use it. I gotta be honest, it's actually kind of hard for me to limit myself in approaching magic because I feel like there's so much gold in this book. I could kind of name every single trick for you as one of my favorites, and that would be genuine. So I urge you to explore this book, come up with your own favorites, and post them down in the comments below. I don't want to forget about my packet trick magicians out there. There's a trick called Jewel Thief that I used to work on a long time ago. You're constantly stealing a card from a packet of cards in increasingly impossible ways. It's a fun trick if you are into those close-up style packet trick routines. If you've always wanted to do a bottle production in your act, but you weren't sure exactly how or didn't have a good method, and you don't really want to buy a lot of expensive props, check out A Drinking Problem. I have a friend who uses this exact method in his show, which he's performed for lots of paid gigs, as well as his Magic Castle set. The bottom line effect is that you get to produce a bottle out of an empty paper bag that's unfolded and other props are brought out of the bag. It can be done stand up, and the angles are really, really good. Change for a 5 is a Monty style effect. It's all done under the guise of a story where you were betting with someone $5 a hand for whether or not you could find the queen. In the end, though, this one differs from so many others because all 3 cards in play, which are never taken out of their sight, change into 5s to show that you owed him $5, $10, $15. Really cool, really easy to do, and the climax is just amazing. 2 more in this book. The puppy trick is his take on the ambitious card plot, and it works here because instead of it being about some ambitious card, which really doesn't make much sense at all, instead it personalizes the trick to the participant because they draw a puppy on the card, and then they're calling their puppy to come to them, and it constantly comes back to them no matter where it is in the deck. There's lots more to this, so don't think that I've just given away the secret. Definitely check out the trick if you perform the ambitious card, but you want to take it to the next level so that your participants will get emotionally invested with a good plot. The Power of Love is a routine that while I never performed it, I loved it enough that I actually bought all of the supplies to do so. You're going to borrow a ring, put it inside of a jewel box, mix it up with a couple other jewel boxes, and they're going to try to find their ring in a Monty-style routine. In the end, their ring has vanished from those boxes. There's a funny kicker involved with a bunch of plastic party rings for kids. In the end, their ring is found inside of a jeweler's box that's been inside a sealed glass jar on the other side of the room in plain sight the whole routine. I hope you're getting value out of this video, and if you are, consider liking or commenting down below to let me know that you're getting value out of these videos. The last book that I'm going to talk about is Interpreting Magic by David Regal, and this is his biggest one yet. It's designed and written in the same style as Approaching Magic, which is one of my favorites, but this one is done on thick, glossy paper with full color photographs. It is a gorgeous book, and in addition to all of the great tricks that we're going to highlight, he has one more thing in this book that I want you to be aware of that you should definitely go check out, and I'll share it right after I share some of my favorite tricks from this book. Warp Drive is his take on Card Warp, a classic plot in Magic, but he's done some different things with this than you'll find in the normal Card Warp. One is that your participant can choose any card, and the second is that he has incorporated a 3/4 card display. He didn't come up with it originally, but it is a really cool display to show more of the card warped than you typically see. If you liked the idea of the trick I mentioned before of there and back, where a ring or something like that moves back and forth from under 2 inverted wine glasses, then you should check out There in Interpreting Magic, which uses a coin, a $50, but this time the coin is marked. And while the coin can't go back and forth like the previous version, it has its own advantages, and you don't have to do quite as much preparation. So you could probably carry this around with you and do it with a couple of borrowed cocktail napkins and wine glasses, which itself is an advantage. Glass and Gold is a borrowed ring vanishing from a shot glass while covered by a dollar bill. There are no funny moves. The ring simply vanishes from the shot glass, but don't worry, you can cause it to reappear and dump it back into your participant's hands. This trick illustrates exactly how David Regal can take some simple methods and create a lot of magic out of that moment. A cup is a switching device made out of a paper coffee cup. It lets you switch one object for another under the guise of a really simple, everyday object like a paper cup. It's limited only by your imagination, so if you're looking for something to transform one object to another and do so discreetly, this might be your tool. Eye on the Die is a really clever way to gimmick your crazy cube that you received in your beginner's magic kit. David Regal used to fool Dean Dill and some of the people in his shop when he would go visit. So for the cost of $5 or less, you can have a piece that will fool magicians. That's not typically David's MO, But if that appeals to you, here's one that you can try. If you've always wanted to do a drawing duplication but do it close up or walk around and not have to do the bigger versions with some of the more elaborate props that are required, check out You and Me. It's done with basically nothing more than business cards, and it packs all of the same powerful punch that any drawing duplication does. If you haven't already picked up on it, David Regal loves offbeat style effects, and No is no exception to that. You have 3 cards selected, and using one of those buttons that you press that has a voice, you use a lie detector plot to try to discover what their card is, and the kicker is that the third person's card is found actually inside the button. So if you're looking for a way to add humor to your routine with an unusual prop, this could be your ticket. If you want to do a surprising and amazing Monty routine using only 2 cards, then check out Two-Eyed Monty. It has a lot of different beats to the Monty action, and in the end it has the benefit of ending clean if you so desire. Doctor is a big parlor or stage size prediction that allows your participants to choose freely from some different professions to see if they're compatible with each other. In the end, what makes this prediction so special is that the prediction is big. It's one of those banners that can be pulled up and drawn up under their chin to show that they're dressed as whatever profession was selected. This play's huge and has a lot of humorous byplay, as you can imagine. David's bottle is a prediction sealed inside of a glass wine bottle. You can have your participants name some freely selected things like the kind of car they would want to drive, etc. And in the end, whatever they said is predicted inside the bottle. You have to dump the piece of paper down to the neck of the bottle, reach in with some tweezers, pull it out, and immediately hand it to someone. No funny moves whatsoever. Everything is predicted inside the bottle. It's a very clever gimmick. It'll require some arts and crafts to make your own, but if you're looking for an impossible prediction style effect, this is going to be pretty hard to beat. He also tips his marketed effect in flight. This is a tossed out deck style routine, but your participants get to start off by shuffling the deck themselves. You put some rubber bands around it, toss it around to 3 different people, and you're able to name the cards that they thought of. There are no switches in this. Yes, the deck that they shuffle is the deck that the participants peek at. Methodologically, this is really incredible, but the routine plays very practically as well. As with all of the other books, there are a ton of really great routines in here, and so I might not have covered your favorite. But here's the thing I want you to check out, even if none of these tricks sound like they might be for you, and that is the incredible number of detailed interviews that David has shared with us here in Interpreting Magic. This book represents some of the best value of any of the books he's published, not only because of the tricks, but you get to hear from luminaries in our field like Mike Caveney, Darren Brown, Teller, Johnny Thompson, David Williamson, Rob Zabrecki, Jim Steinmeier, Juan Tamariz, John Bannon, Eugene Berger, Mac King. I don't need to go on. There are literally another dozen names in here, and these are some really juicy, meaty interviews, and you will glean a lot from reading what these professionals have to say. So no matter what kind of magic you're into, I hope I covered a trick that you like, and maybe it will inspire you to go listen to all of the wisdom that David shares with us in the interview that I did with him a few years ago. You can check that out over here. As always, my friend, thanks for watching, and until next time, keep reading.